Hello once again, everyone. So, bit of a different one for you. This is kind of moveset breakdowns, and so I'm going to put it in my moveset breakdowns playlist. But this is kind of my first time branching out into film and television. And what it is I wanted to go over a particular move demonstrated in the Highlander TV series between Connor and Duncan when they meet in kind of the late 1600s. At one point, they go over a move when using fetters, actually, and it's super cool to see because they are using fetters at the time. And the lockup that they do isn't improbable, is the biggest thing that surprised me. And the entry to it is honestly one that we use all the time here at the school and do exploit. Now, the actual lockup itself, mostly showboating. But I still wanted to go over it because it does use some interesting, pretty good historical concepts. So, joining me is Jarrett, who's going to be Duncan, and I will be Connor. Now, what happens is, for this first part, is I'm going to turn my back to Jarrett, which is never generally a good idea, and I'm going to stand right foot forward with my sword down into Albert. Now, we never actually get specified what attack is supposed to be launched at Connor's back, but it can be presumed, since everyone in Highlander only dies when their head is cut off, he's probably throwing a more middle-like cut for my neck, which is important for this next part. So he starts his cut. I'm going to pivot around my leg and drop into a hanger, right? Now, this pivot is not terribly difficult. In the actual show, he more pirouettes, but while that's faster, it's not necessarily as strong. If you were looking to do something more practical with this, then I'm also stepping away from the cut as I turn. Now, once I've got this hanger, I'm in a pretty good position. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down on the pommel and suppress his sword downward. Now, this part, at least, comes up quite a bit. You see this used in various different plays, be it the Crumpfowl or stuff coming in from Porta di Ferro. It is pushing the blade down to lock him up, and normally we look for some sort of short edge cut. Now, the interesting thing is, the next part of this is essentially a fake short edge cut. So at the moment, he isn't necessarily pushing against my sword, but there is tension here because I do have him trapped. So to exploit this, I'm going to start raising up, which causes him to cover. Now, it is interesting in that in the clip, Duncan covers by going into an ox-like position. So Jarrett has pulled back his hands to try and cover his head. His tip isn't really what he's worrying about. This presents me the opportunity to bring my hand off of my blade and grab hold of his arm, which is what we're going to launch into next. But before we do that, let's show how we got there once again. So, I stand here, he cuts to me, boom, and down. Now, I'm going to slide it up, causing him to start to cover. In this tempo, I'm going to take my hand off, step forward with my left foot, and snake it between his hands. Now, at the same time, I'm raising my guard over my head. Then I put it across the back of my neck, and I'm locking Jarrett's arms up against me. Now, we don't actually get a terribly good view of what exactly Connor is doing hand-wise. All I know is that he goes on the inside of the arms, and I'm personally grabbing Jarrett's tricep as well as his jacket because I do need tension here, right? So Jarrett is currently resisting the pull of my arm, which in turn puts it against the flat of the blade across my neck. So I've got 2 points of tension here. Now, Jarrett, you don't feel particularly threatened at the moment, do you?
Nah.
No. Do you feel in control of the grappling action?
Could be.
Somewhat, and that's the important thing, is as the line in the show is, oh, but now I've got control, right? My terrible Scottish accent for you. Now, at this point, Connor says, do you? Now, this next action is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tension that I've built up, and I am going to expel it by pushing my hand out of here. What this is going to cause is it will cause Jarrett to step away, and at the same time, it's going to free the tension that I've built up on my sword. So as I go to push, just slides around my head, and I'm not powering that cut really at all, and it always kind of ends up naturally going at about neck/head level. Now in the show, Duncan does a full turn, and so he ends up with the blade in front of him. I'm going to be honest, that's probably a mix of, one, presumed strength that I don't have because I'm not an immortal, right? And two, maybe once he's being pushed, Duncan is trying to step around to cover himself again. Either one is perfectly likely. Sometimes the push at the elbows is, again, another historical move you do see quite often. And sometimes people will try to turn with it to just, lessen the momentum, not fall over, just get their eyes back on target. So it can be a variety of things. But once again, let's show how we got there. So I stand with my back turned, down, up, through here, and then tension, right? And you notice sometimes the distance can be a little bit funky. Jarrett stepped back on that cover, so I had to really reach. That's okay though, right? But once I've got that tension built up, no problem. So let's just go ahead and show it from the other angle, I suppose. This is, by the way, the actual angle that we see in the show, as Jarrett is currently on the left side of your screen, I'm on the right side, which is how we also get to see which foot is forward. Down, up, through, tension, push. So, overall, not too complicated, right? Pretty cool movement. Now, would I say that it is practical? No. Probably the biggest thing that this move requires is when I go for the lockup itself, Jarrett needs to be pulling back away from me to put the tension onto the flat of my blade. If he's not, if he tries to yield in any way, me putting the sword over my head is kind of pointless. However, if he does try to resist that grapple and I lock him in that position, I'm not necessarily in any danger, right? Let's just go back there real quick. So we'll just go from the cut over. So I've gotten to here, I've come down. Right here, right? I'm not in any danger from Jarrett right now. He can try and bring his pommel up into my face, but really that just frees my sword, right? He can't push his blade into my neck because my blade is between our heads. I'm not in any danger of being cut because the flat of the blade is sitting nicely on my neck, right? I'm in a pretty good position here. Now, would I recommend staying here? No. But if I were to say to use this move practically, if you got here, right, what I would say is when he freaks out and tries to lift or pull away or whatever, just go ahead and pop that pommel forward because it adds a lot of power to it very easily. The other alternative I would say is, since I've gotten locked in here, if he tries to do anything against my arm, right, same idea. Whenever it laxes on the power of my sword being caught behind my head, it just adds energy to it. And one last thing I want to talk about, the actual wrap that we're doing here, is one that we will see again if you're watching my Codex Wallerstein series. What I'm essentially doing is when I drive him up, that little opening right there is one that's quite easily exploited in a couple different ways. In this case, we're going to the inside of the arm, which makes it very easy for me to wrap hold of his elbow and start exploiting pressure like this. I have done this one in sparring, and it is sweet when you land it, right? And it also negates his ability to use his sword. If he tries to let go with his left hand and counter-grapple me or anything along those lines, I no longer have to worry about his sword whatsoever. Another alternative that, again, we'll go over in the Codex Wallerstein series is once you get him to raise up into that left ox, right, you can also swing through here and just push it over back of his head. That's a particular favorite of mine because it's so stupidly simple. But either way, I just wanted to go over that one because the pieces, honestly, they all make sense. It's just the lockup itself is very stylized and also very purpose-built. If I didn't have to worry about the rest of me, and he was focused on trying to cut my head off, I may go for this one, right? If nothing else, it looks really good if you can land it. And just landing that lockup, if you could do that in sparring, it doesn't even matter about the push and the head cut off afterwards. You've won, right? But either way, just a fun little moveset breakdown for you. Hopefully we get another Highlander movie at some point because, oh man, I missed that series. Just as long as it's not like Endgame. Either way, though, thank you very much, Jarrett. And we will go over some other strange movie and video game movements another time.